Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of Mormonism Live. I'm Radio Free Mormon. How are you, Mr. Bill Reel?
Mr. Radio Free Mormon, I'm doing great. How's life treating you?
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Hope you're doing well too, mi amigo.
Yeah, I will leave tomorrow to go to Lehi, Utah to hang out with a friend, and I'll record Mormonism After Dark from there. So the setting will be a little different, but tonight we've got a great show. Any thoughts from you before we get started?
Just to let everybody know, we were scrambling a little bit behind the scenes. We're about 3 minutes late going live here this evening because we wanted to include a video clip of some importance that Bill was able to find actually.
Yeah. So with that, let me grab the slideshow here, and we'll start with the conversation. So let me.
Yeah. Today's date is November 6th, 2024. The title of tonight's show is Getting Your Own Planet in Mormonism, episode number 204 of Mormonism Live. We are 4 short of our 4-year anniversary.
Look at that. We're almost there, folks. All right. So I'm going to add this to the stage. The centerpiece, the Salvation Exaltation with the little animated figures underneath, that's from a church video that we won't get into tonight, but you would think that if we're going to address whether we get our own planet or not, that'd be the perfect place for the church to say it. They don't, which is why Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel are here tonight to help the church out a little bit and help explain a little bit of LDS theology to you, both the post-Mormon as well as the believer, and as well as maybe the never-Mormon, because a lot of things have happened in Mormon history that have made this topic sort of interesting, and depending on where you're listening or where you're reading, you might not get the same message. So we thought we'd help blend the two together and add some consistency to the church.
Sometimes the LDS Church needs a little help telling the truth about itself. That's where we come in.
Yes. And so I want to go back in time. What we were spending time just before the show started, making sure that we had, was a moment that happened in 1997. In 1997, Time Magazine does a feature article on the Mormons. In fact, I think maybe like most of the magazine had to do with the church. It was a large segment of the magazine anyway. And in the article, there is an interview done with then president of the church, Gordon B. Hinckley. And I was telling you before the show started, Gordon B. Hinckley's tenure was really the moment where the church it had sort of hit its peak. It was seen with some level of respect among, I think, the general populace, even though it was still sort of weird. Everybody sort of knew the Mormons were nice people. Gordon B. Hinckley he was not afraid to talk to anyone. And so he did multiple interviews with Mike Wallace, Time Magazine, several with Larry King. Yep. And so when Time Magazine does this, they did it in August of 1997. And Gordon B. Hinckley is asked about the couplet from Lorenzo Snow, as God, or as man is, God once was, as God is, man may become.
Right.
And Gordon B. Hinckley was asked if that is the teaching of the church today. And Gordon B. Hinckley says,
can we stop for just a second before we get to his quote?
Yep.
Yes, that is the couplet that synopsizes what Joseph Smith himself taught in the King Follett Discourse. Joseph Smith taught it. It's in the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. It even made it past the editing penknife of Joseph Fielding Smith, who compiled the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. It's in there. He knows it. And yet this is how he responds.
Yeah. So Gordon B. Hinckley says, I don't know that we teach it. I don't know that we emphasize it. And I want to stop here for just a moment. Just recently, the church's legal team, when the judge asked the church's lawyer if they think they have a right to hide anything, the lawyer responds, I think that the rules around, again, not his exact words, but the rules around religious freedom mean that we don't have to teach everything. We don't have to emphasize it. So he uses the exact same 2 words, teaching and emphasizing, which in his way of talking, that lawyer was trying to say, we have a right to hide anything we want.
Yes, we don't need no stinking transparency.
Yeah, which sort of tips the hat that's sort of what Gordon B. Hinckley is saying is, I don't know that we talk about it out loud, specifically to the general public. I don't know that we emphasize it specifically to the general public. But he says, I don't know that we teach it. I don't know that we emphasize it. I haven't heard it discussed for a long time in public discourse. Now, you and I heard it every other week in church. It's almost like the guy wasn't going to church at all. For him,
but notice how he couches it in public discourse.
Public discourse. Yeah.
When was the last time you heard it talked about in public discourse?
Yeah. If you're not counting the ward meetings, if those aren't public discourse.
Those aren't public. This is public, and he's not talking about it.
He says, I don't know. I don't know all the circumstances under which that statement was made. Now, here's the prophet of the Lord, right? I understand the philosophical background behind it, but I don't know a lot about it, and I don't know that others know a lot about it. Well, we'll get to some pieces of that here later, but
Joseph Smith seemed to know a lot about it.
Yeah. And several other prophets spoke at great length. Brigham Young right after Joseph, and several prophets after that. So this comes out in Time magazine in August 1997. In 2 months later, right? August, September, October. 2 months later, General Conference hits. And Gordon B. Hinckley gives the opening talk from General Conference that in that October 1997. And that talk is titled Drawing Nearer to the Lord. President Gordon B. Hinckley, president of the church. And I'm going to read it here. In fact, RFM, if you want to read it, and then we'll play the audio just so you can hear Hinckley say it.
I will be happy to, but note that there had been pushback, blowback on him for having equivocated on something that is a foundational doctrine in Mormonism. It's certainly not something that the missionaries go out and teach to the investigators then or now, but it is foundational to Mormonism and the entire plan of exaltation. And here's what he says. This is the published version of his address in conference in October of 1997. The media, he says, the media have been kind and generous to us. It's a gracious way to start out. This past year of pioneer celebrations has resulted in very extensive, favorable press coverage, 1997 being, of course, the 150th anniversary of the Saints arriving in the Salt Lake Valley. There have been a few things we wish might have been different. I personally have been much quoted and in a few instances misquoted and misunderstood. He's not going to tell us what those are. He's just going to say that's the case. He goes on, I think that's to be expected. None of you, and this is the key, none of you need worry because you read something that was incompletely reported.
By the way, I want to stop you for a moment. He was interviewed face-to-face video footage on most of the other places. The place you would have read him is in Time magazine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. You need not worry. And this was the key. You need not worry that I do not understand some matters of doctrine. This is exactly what he's talking about. The blowback he got for downplaying the idea that Joseph Smith, everybody knows Joseph Smith taught that God was once a man and lived on a world prior to this and went through his plan of salvation and was exalted. And that's how he got to be God. But he doesn't want to say that to Time magazine. He says, you need not worry that I do not understand some matters of doctrine. I think I understand them thoroughly. And it is unfortunate that the reporting may not make this clear. So it's Time magazine's fault, not his equivocation. Go ahead.
This happened in 1997. Guess what year I joined the church? 1996. I'm only a year in to my membership in the LDS church, and I clearly understood and had heard multiple times the teaching that as God is, man may become, as man is, God once was. That whole thing. I know it was in reverse, but that whole thing. I heard it over and over and over again. Now, notice here, he says, I think I understand them thoroughly. But if we go back to the original, I don't know a lot about it, and I don't know that others know a lot about it. I mean, to the public, he wants to play like this is some obscure thing that he barely has any familiarity with, and so do the other leaders. They barely have a familiarity. And then he goes in front of the membership and says that I think I understand them thoroughly.
Yes. He's talking to the members and assuring them that when he was talking to Time magazine, he was not telling the truth. He was downplaying it because he didn't want to tell the truth about the LDS beliefs about God to Time magazine. And so people are going, what the heck? I thought we believed this. And now he's saying we don't. So he comes back to say, no, we actually believe this. I just wasn't going to tell that to the Gentiles.
Yeah. I read Time magazine. I remember reading it and going, that's weird. Like, I've heard this thing. I know this is what we teach here.
Yep.
Then I remember during General Conference when he spoke and me going like, like that's like I know he's addressing that. I know he is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It was not left up to any of us to figure it out. We all knew this was the thing that was being addressed. And I only around a year into the church in my membership knew clearly what was going on here. And I'll just add to this. It's not only that they don't, President Hinckley and the rest of the leadership, they don't want the general public to wrestle with this thing that Mormons believe that God was once a man. But they also don't want the general public wrestling with us human beings become gods just like God is.
Right. They don't want to talk about either of those. His final line on this quote was, I hope you will never look to the public press as the authority on the doctrines of the church. Wow.
It wasn't the press. It was Hinckley who said it.
Yeah. And I defended him in this back in 1997. What is that? 24 plus 3, 27 years ago.
Yeah.
I defended his doing that. But now I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, here's the main thing. Here's the thing that really hit me. It was really today. How stupid did I have to be to think that he would deceive the public, but he won't deceive me? Why would members of the church think that a man who will deceive the group of people that's outside the church is going to be completely straight with you just because you're inside the church?
Yeah. And on the back end, I mean, looking back and forest from the trees, you can see that the church leadership lies to the members on a consistent and regular basis.
Yeah, the way he described the perpetual immigration fund, the whole thing about leaders of the church receive only a small stipend, that was all total BS. And he's telling that to the members of the church.
Yeah. Before we went live, I was also listening to the Larry King interview. And in that, Larry King asked a question about the tithing of the church. And now I know about the SEC, right? So that interview has certain context to it that you wouldn't have known at the time, but now you would. And he defends the collecting tithing by saying, well, we've got buildings to build and we got this to do and that to do. The one thing he never tells Larry King or the general public is that we're hoarding most of this money and putting it into investment funds and trying to get as much capital as we can.
Yes. And of course, this is 97. And I think that was the year of the inception of the Ensign Peak account.
Yeah. Great time to be able to say all those things, because then you get a little buffer before you have to really speak out on those kinds of things again. So you get to save lots of money. Here is Gordon B. Hinckley, and this is the audio from that moment.
The media have been kind and generous to us. This past year of Pioneer celebrations has resulted in very extensive, favorable press coverage. There have been a few things we wish we might have had a little different. I personally have been much quoted, and in a few instances, misquoted and misunderstood. I think that's to be expected. None of you need worry because you read something that was incompletely reported. You need not worry that I do not understand some matters of doctrine.
They knew.
I think I understand them thoroughly. And it is unfortunate that the reporting may not make this clear. I hope you will never look to the public press as the authority on the doctrines of the church.
He tips his hand that when the crowd laughs, they indicate we know exactly what moment you are talking about.
Exactly. And so he's going to blame the reporter for lying to him.
Yeah. The only way that works is if the reporter is posting a completely different conversation than what happened.
Right.
Because the reporter isn't saying what he's getting from the message. He's reporting what President Hinckley said.
Right.
Yeah.
What reporter's going to come up with that?
And this, this really isn't directly connected to the topic tonight. It's sort of a prior moment, but the moment we're about to talk about reminded, I think, RFM and I both about this moment, which happened. And so what happens then is, I think in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, could maybe it's earlier, 2007 maybe. It's in March of whatever year it was, 2007, 2011. By the way, audience, if you want to look it up and let us know for sure. But the Book of Mormon musical comes out on Broadway, and it's done by the creators of South Park. I forget their names, but the creators of South Park. And it's immediately after this Book of Mormon musical comes out, which is getting rave reviews. What's that?
2011.
2011. Yep, March of 2011. Because I thought it was 2011, but then somewhere else I saw 2007 being noted. It won 9 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. It got rave reviews, and the church was so concerned about the publicity that they actually put a advertisement into the program for the play that said something like, "You've seen the play, now you should read the book."
Right, that was a brilliant move.
It was, and for them to sort of let themselves not be taken too seriously, right? Like
to lean into it.
Yeah. Yep. And at that moment they did great. But immediately following, the church puts out an article on the LDS newsroom, and they want to answer basic questions of the church. And one of them, actually 2 of them, number 11 and number 12, and you can still find this document on the church's website. All you would have to do to find it really simply is take one sentence from what I got to put it up on the screen.
Yeah, to quote Elder Oaks, wow.
By the way, they've
been hiding that for a long time.
Yeah. You could take any sentence from what you're seeing on the screen, put it in quotation marks, put it through a Google search engine, and this will come up. And it's a article that the church put out on its newsroom to answer just basic questions of the church.
FAQs.
Yeah. And so number 11, do Latter-day Saints believe they can become gods? Here's the answer. This is the
Can you
church.
stop right there?
Yeah, please.
Ask any Mormon.
Yeah.
You happen to see. I mean, do Latter-day Saints believe they can become gods? Answer, yes.
Of course.
Of course they do.
Of course.
That's the whole point of the church.
Yeah.
But that's not the answer the church gives.
It's foundational. Latter-day Saints believe that it is God's purpose to exalt us to become like him, but this teaching is often misrepresented by those who caricature the faith. The Latter-day Saint belief is no different than the biblical teaching which states, "The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together." Romans 8, 16, 17. And the church is going, no, we all believe. Hey, Christians, us Mormons, we all believe together. Romans 8, 16, 17, but not the same way. And that part we're not going to tell you.
Right. You think you could say yes or no to that question, but they don't. Instead, they engage in a bunch of language that doesn't answer the question, but it just doesn't answer the question. It's intended to not answer the question.
Masters of obfuscation. Will you take the second question?
Sure. At least this one they answered, even though they lied when they answered it. 12. Do Latter-day Saints believe they will, quote unquote, get their own planet? Answer, no. That's ridiculous. Ask any Mormon you happen to see. Do Mormons believe that they will eventually get their own planet if they're faithful and exalted? Of course they do. They go on, after saying no, they go on and say, this idea is not taught in Latter-day Saints scripture, nor is it a doctrine of the church, because it's inconvenient right now. This is one of those temporary commandments, I guess. Temporary doctrines. This misunderstanding, right? This misunderstanding stems from speculative comments by leaders of the church, prophets, seers, and revelators, and presidents of the church. That's the part they don't say.
And found in the correlated materials of the church, which we will show here in just a few minutes.
Yes, you brought the receipts. They say this misunderstanding stems from speculative comments unreflective of scriptural doctrine. Well, they just threw the past leaders under the bus there, sub silentio. Latter-day Saints believe that we are all sons and daughters of God and that all of us have the potential to grow during and after this life to become like our Heavenly Father. You can see the relationship between the two questions, even in that answer, right? See Romans 8:16 through 17. The church does not and has never purported to fully understand the specifics of Christ's statement that in my Father's house are many mansions, which is a lame ass kind of sentence to end this paragraph with. What do you even make of that?
They want to say that there's a basic, general, not specific thing. Some people have said some things to kind of extend it further, but we should just stop at in my Father's house there are many mansions, and anybody who goes beyond that point maybe is off base.
Yeah. Well, I think what they're trying to do, this is the passive aggressive stuff that Mormons are so good at. Somebody who wrote this actually thinks that John 14:2, in my Father's house are many mansions, supports the idea that we'll get our own planet. And I'll bet if you looked through the corpus of church teachings since its inception on the subject, you'll probably find somebody making that connection. So what they're trying to say is this actually teaches it, but we're going to turn it and say the church does not and has never purported to fully understand the specifics of Christ's statement. But if we did understand it fully, and if you understood it fully, you'd realize, yeah, we're going to get our own planet.
Yeah. And then something else happens. So this comes out, and immediately certain respected voices in Mormonism and non-respected voices too, we'll get to one of those, but respected voices in Mormonism, out of an obligation to be loyal to the church, backs up this statement. So let's show a couple of those. So first off, The Atlantic has an article. Mormons don't technically get a planet once they die, say Mormons. So this is the coverage of this moment in time.
Right. And that's because they're dealing with news agencies who have no idea that they're lying. They're being lied to.
Yeah.
And so they're reporting it as if it's really true.
Yeah. Essentially,
Can I stop here for, I'm sorry, Bill. I just want to stop and make something clear.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will say, well, Mormons don't get their own planet. It's not wrapped up like a Christmas gift and handed to them on, Christmas morning. No, they have to create it. They have to use the priesthood. You've heard that. Bruce R. McConkie, power of the priesthood you use to create, just like Heavenly Father did to create this world and all that kind of stuff, right? If that's the case, and if that's what they want to quibble about, and if that's why they put it in quotation marks, then that's what they should say. You don't just say no unless you're trying to deceive people. If you're trying to tell the truth, you say, not exactly. We don't think we're going to get our own planet, but we do believe we'll become like God and be able to create our own worlds.
Yeah.
That would be truthful.
That would also be worse for them, so they don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
So what happens is you get these articles like this one in the Atlantic. You get this one in the Seattle Times.
Seattle Times.
People don't get own planets in afterlife. That's what the Mormons say. The Mormon church is pushing back against the notion that members of the faith are taught that they'll get their own planet in the afterlife, a misconception popularized in pop culture, most recently by the Broadway show, The Book of Mormon. The outside Gentiles are making up shit about the church, and the church is just trying to correct the notion. We don't teach that people get their own planets.
Mm-hmm. They are lying to the news organizations, and the news organizations, without doing any research, are eating it up with a spoon.
Yeah. Mormons don't get own planets in afterlife. The AP Press. This is Brady McCombs again, who I think is the author of that one.
Yeah.
Not the author of that one.
Yeah. A lot of times those AP articles get picked up.
Yeah. Then you've got Morgan Lee, Christian Post reporter. Mormon church dispels myth that believers get their own planet after they die. So there it is again. Read this. Unfortunately, for Mormons who might have based their theology off a hit Broadway show, the Mormons, like us Latter-day Saints, we watch the Broadway show, and that's how we get these strange ideas that we're going to get our own planet. No one from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will receive his or her own planet after they die.
And they're even saying, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Because
unfortunately.
you know something? That's a selling point.
Yeah. Sky News, Mormons, we do not get a planet in the afterlife. The church denies its members are taught they will get their own planet in the afterlife as popularized in the Book of Mormon musical, because the Book of Mormon doesn't say anything about it.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. I had wondered about that.
Yeah. So then again, church has a video out, Salvation and Exaltation, and they do note that there are some mysteries, some things we don't know. I'm not going to play that. You can go watch it. It's just meant to be very vanilla and not get the church in any trouble.
But at the end of it, it says, now you know,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now you know.
Yeah.
Actually, now you don't know. Now you know exactly as much as we want you to know.
Correct.
That's what they should have the tagline.
And that's the tagline for everything. So then we're going to start to get into some of the things that get said around this by voices that are Mormon voices, but not the church directly. But first, the church itself says something. So how do Latter-day Saints envision exaltation? This is in the gospel topic essay. So this would have come out around this is one of the first ones that came out. So 2013-ish or so.
Okay.
Latter-day Saints' doctrine of exaltation is often similarly reduced in media to a cartoonish image of people receiving their own planets. By the way, the person who did a cartoonish portrayal was Ed Decker in the cartoon he uses in The Godmakers.
Right.
And that's from, decades before this. And sort of, I think, at least in part, sort of what they're referencing. Then in the next paragraph, they say, few Latter-day Saints would identify with the caricature of having their own planet. Again, you point out, every Latter-day Saint, at least those who grew up with at least the 80s and 90s and 2000s, would clearly understand that the reason we're paying tithing, the reason we're going to all these meetings, the reason we're abandoning our family and putting in so much time and service in the church, the reason we're giving all of our time, energy, and resources to the building up of the kingdom of God, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints by covenant in the temple, is because Mormonism, unlike the rest of Christianity, promises the grandest time if we make it. We get our own planet, we create our own worlds, we create spirit babies with lots of women if you're a priesthood holder, and then we populate our planets and see the plan of salvation roll forth a whole nother place in the universe.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. So there's that. And then you get these voices. So Richard Bushman, you want to read this one?
Just underscoring that what you just read was in an essay that was really designed to be to the public. Okay.
Yeah, this was
a
topic essay for the public.
Yeah. Now we get to Richard Bushman, noted LDS historian, where he tries to play this down. To CNN, apparently, he says, take the issue of getting your own planet, for example. Elder Price, that's one of the guys in the Book of Mormon musical, I just saw that. Elder Price talks about a planet for himself and one for Jesus. Those are not really core Mormon beliefs, core being the entirely important word in that sentence. Mormon scriptures and church leaders don't say anything about people getting their own planets. The idea is more like lore than doctrine.
Richard Bushman knows better, RFM. Richard Bushman is not the village idiot. He's as smart at Mormonism as anybody, and he's old enough to have been around the block. He clearly is helping the church position a deception. And I just want to hold Richard Bushman accountable. I respect him a ton, but in this moment, he's lying through his teeth.
Yeah, he's not giving the full story. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong out there, okay? But my recollection is, remember the teachings of the presidents of the church manuals that they published for Relief Society and Elders Quorum and High Priest back when we used to have High Priest group?
Mm-hmm.
The first one, I believe it was Joseph Smith, of course. It was after 1997 that it was published. It contained the King Follett Discourse with the teaching in it about God once having been a man as well. Yeah. So these are things that the church publishes, for its members and then dissembles about to non-members.
Yeah. So Richard Bushman says that that's just lore. It's not in Mormon scriptures, and church leaders don't say anything about people getting their own planet. Richard, I hope you're watching. You're going to learn a new thing or two if that's the truth from your perspective. So you'll see. Then you get the non-respected voice, fair, faithful answers, informed response, the Foundation for Apologetic Information and Research. A Mormon apologetic group even claims there is no Mormon doctrine that says we will become gods of our own planets. A search of LDS.org, which includes all of the church lesson manuals, all the talks given in church conferences, all the magazines published after 1970, published by the LDS Church, shows that there are no instances, zero, where it is taught that we will be gods of our own planets.
And you know how they justified that, don't you, Bill?
Because the church maybe has removed any references, which they actually haven't. We're going to show them tonight. But one thing they could be positioning themselves is if the church has removed anything, they wouldn't be accountable to that.
I have an idea. Even though it's taught over and over and over again since the beginning of this church, what they did was they came up with an expression or a phrase, gods of our own planets, that would not show up. And they put it in quotes, and they did a search for it, and it came up with zero. So that's what they're saying. And these guys are the worst liars of them all.
Yeah. I know because I had to leave them because they just, and I had to not follow their rules because they were so deceptive and dishonest. All right. So now, was that true or false? I'm marking it false. I think by the end of the night, you couldn't watch this episode and disagree with us.
Elder Oaks could have justified saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, but he could justify anything, couldn't he?
It's technically true.
Yes.
You have to work very hard to say something that's technically true, but gives the exact opposite impression of what the truth is.
Yeah. So let's go through these. Let's see who's telling the truth. Who are the truth tellers and who are the deceivers? So let's start with Brigham Young. And I didn't use Joseph Smith. Again, I think part of the argument can be the original prophet got something wrong. We got away from it. What I think is important is to notice that this teaching permeates the church from the very beginning until the modern moment. It hasn't even gone away yet. And we'll see that because the current president of the church has taught this as well. So second president, Brigham Young, do you want to read this one? And we'll just go every other one.
Sure. I'm just going to say both of these come from conference addresses. It's the Journal of Discourses. These are the conference addresses that Fair just got done telling us they did a search of all of them. And they couldn't come up with anything like that. Okay. First one, Journal of Discourses, volume 17, page 143, Brigham Young. All those who are counted worthy to be exalted and to become gods, even the sons of God, will go forth and have earths and worlds like those who framed this and millions on millions of others.
Yeah.
Next quote, a little bit longer. I'll try and pick up the pace. Having fought the good fight, we then shall be prepared to lay our bodies down to rest, to await the morning of the resurrection, when they will come forth and be reunited with the spirits, the faithful, as it is said, receiving crowns, glory, immortality, and eternal lives, even a fullness with the Father, when Jesus shall present his work to the Father, saying, Father, here is the work thou gavest me to do. Then will they become gods, even the sons of God. Then will they become eternal fathers, eternal mothers, eternal sons, and eternal daughters. Being eternal in their organization, they go from glory to glory, from power to power. They will never cease to increase and to multiply, worlds without end. When they receive their crowns, their dominions, they then will be prepared to frame earths. They then will be prepared to frame earths like unto ours, and to people them in the same manner as we have been brought forth by our parents, by our Father and God. And that was October 8th, 1876, Journal of Discourses, 18259.
So then we go to fifth president of the church, Lorenzo Snow. Now, first off, on page 90 of chapter 5 of the correlated manual titled Presidents of the Church Student Manual, Religion 345. This is the 2004 edition. I have a hunch this is not going to be found in the modern representation of this manual, but in the 2004 edition, under the subheading, they shall organize worlds and rule over them. So fifth president of the church, Lorenzo Snow, stated this, and the church took this quote and put it into at least one piece of its correlated curriculum at Brigham Young University and for institute courses all across the world. So only a short time before his death, President Snow visited the Brigham Young University, then Brigham Young Academy at Provo. President Brimhall escorted the party through one of the buildings. He wanted to reach the assembly room as soon as possible, as the students had already gathered. They were going through one of the kindergarten rooms. President Brimhall had reached the door and was about to open it and go on when President Snow said, "Wait a minute, President Brimhall. I want to see these children at work. What are they doing?" Brother Brimhall replied that they were making clay spheres. "That is very interesting," the president said. "I want to watch them." He quietly watched the children for several minutes and then lifted a little girl, perhaps 6 years of age, and stood her on a table. He then took the clay sphere from her hand and, turning it to Brother Brimhall, said, "President Brimhall, these children are now at play, making mud worlds. The time will come when some of these boys, through their faithfulness to the gospel," of course, only the boys, "will progress and develop in knowledge, intelligence, and power in future eternities until they shall be able to go into space where there is unorganized matter and call together the necessary elements, and through their knowledge of and control over the laws and powers of nature to organize matter into worlds on which their posterity may dwell and over which they shall rule as gods." Whose worlds are those, RFM? Seems like they belong to the people who are exalted.
Yes, they're mine, all mine. By the way, Bill, did a little looking. Yep, it's still there in the church's website.
Look at that.
It's right after the part where he talks about as man now is, God once was, and as God now is, man may be.
By
It's
the
all
way,
there.
yes, that couplet was in the teaching of the president of the church of the President Lorenzo Snow manual as well, that we all had in Priesthood and Relief Society. So for Hinckley to say that, we're not really teaching it, we're not really emphasizing it, just a few years after that, they republished it again and reviewed it again in every Priesthood and Relief Society class.
This is what is being taught now in institute class.
Yeah. Yeah. Which place, which people get which information? It's a tricky game when it comes to Mormonism.
Yeah, and it's a game they're not really good at playing.
No.
At least not if you know where they're trying to fool you, then you can find it out really fast.
Yes. Okay. You want to take this one? This one is also President Snow.
Sure. October 5th, 1894, Millennial Star. "We are the offspring of God, born with the same faculties and powers as he possesses, capable of enlargement through the experience that we are now passing through in our second estate." All of this is basic stuff in Mormonism. We all know this, who have been members of the church. "He has begotten us in his own image. He has given us faculties and powers that are capable of enlargement until his fullness is reached, which he has promised, until we shall sit upon thrones, governing and controlling our posterity from eternity to eternity and increasing eternally." Another quote, "When two Latter-day Saints are united together in marriage, promises are made to them concerning their offspring that reach from eternity to eternity. They are promised that they shall have the power and the right to govern and control and administer salvation and exaltation and glory to their offspring, worlds without end. And what offspring they do not have here, undoubtedly there will be opportunities to have them hereafter," if you know what I mean. "What else could man wish? Indeed, a man and a woman in the other life, having celestial bodies, free from sickness and disease, glorified and beautified beyond description, standing in the midst of their posterity, governing and controlling them." What's posterity for except to control? Administering life, exaltation, and glory, worlds without end.
If you're governing and controlling the people on the planet that you create, it sounds like it's your damn planet.
And one of the things that makes this just so disingenuous is that over and over again, Mormons, and I've done this too, we talk about how superior our belief is in having worlds where we dwell and where we create people rather than having a heaven that's sort of up in the clouds, right? It's not up in the clouds. God doesn't live in the clouds. He lives on a real planet, as if that makes it sound any more believable, but it does to a Mormon, right?
Yeah, it's far away, and it's in proximity to a star named Kolob. Again, all of these things sort of connect to each other, and they proliferate throughout Mormon hymns, manuals, ensign articles, general conference talks, and you sort of, the moment you start pulling at the string of one of these doctrines to say it's not real, it doesn't exist, it's going to be interconnected with 20 other things, and those things are going to be connected with 20 other things each, and before you know it, you don't have much Mormonism at all.
Right. That was one of the things I was thinking of earlier. If you have no worlds, then there's no point in keeping homosexuals from being married in the temple.
Yeah.
It is all tied in, because the thrust of the argument for not allowing gay marriage in the temple is because it has to be man and woman so that they can have all the sex and the spiritual children in the afterlife to populate what? Their first world.
Yeah. Yeah. Without exaltation, you're really reduced to something much more comparable to just standard Christianity. Exaltation is a big feature in Mormon doctrine.
And how often do you have that argument with people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, almost everybody gets saved, but only a few get exalted.
Right. Yeah. Salvation and exaltation.
Now
okay.
You know.
So Apostle Orson Pratt.
I love this picture of him. He looks kind of like a woodchuck.
Yeah, we're going to find out how much wood could this woodchuck chuck if this woodchuck could chuck wood.
But a very intelligent, brilliant man. And actually, I do like this picture. It only just struck me that he looks a little bit like a woodchuck.
Apostle Orson Pratt says, but another and still greater object the Lord had in view in sending us down from yonder world to this is that we might be redeemed in due time by keeping the celestial law and have our tabernacles restored to us in all the beauty of immortality. Then we will be able to multiply and extend forth our posterity in the increase of our dominion without end. Can spirits do this? No, they remain single. There are no marriages among spirits.
I just realized why that is, because you can't put a ring on it if it's a spirit.
There you go.
Boom.
There are no marriages among spirits, no coupling together of the males and the females among them. But when they rise from the grave after being tabernacled in mortal bodies, they have all the functions that are necessary to people worlds. As our Father and God begat us, sons and daughters, so will we rise immortal, males and females, and beget children, and in our turn form and create worlds and send forth our spirit children to inherit those worlds. That's why it's my planet, because I put my spirit children on it, and I now enact the plan of salvation for them and allow them to now repeat the process, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And now these children can be exalted and go have their own planets. This is exponential increase. This is multiply and replenish the earth, but multiple earths all across the universe.
I feel like if Cardinal Ellis were giving the sermon, he would have said, after being tabernacled in mortal bodies, they have all the functions that are necessary to people worlds. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. And of course, codified would be in there somewhere.
It's codified. That's what I'm living for.
So will we rise immortal, males and females, and beget children, and in our turn form and create worlds, send forth our spirit children to inherit those worlds the same as we were sent here. And thus will the works of God continue, and not only God himself and his son Jesus Christ have the power of endless lives, but also all of his redeemed offspring, aka me, Orson Pratt. So there's that one. And then in the Seer, March 1853, another church periodical, he says, each God, through his wife or wives, raises up a numerous family of sons and daughters. Indeed, there will be no end to the increase of his own children, for each father and mother will be in a condition to multiply forever and ever. As soon as each God has begotten many millions of male and female spirits, and his heavenly inheritance becomes too small to comfortably accommodate his great family, he, in connection with his sons, organizes a new world after a similar order to the one which we now inhabit, where he sends both male and female spirits to inhabit tabernacles of flesh and bones. Thus, each God forms a world for the accommodation of his own sons and daughters. Each of us, exalted, will form our own world for the accommodation of our sons and daughters who are sent forth in their times and seasons. Ooh, now you know where the phrase times and seasons comes from. And generations to be born into the same. The inhabitants of each world are required to reverence, adore, and worship their own personal Father who dwells in the heavens which they formerly inhabited. You become the God, and you are the only God with which they have to do with. Quoting Brigham Young, for instance.
It's interesting that he fought so heavily against the Adam God theory, but here he incorporates that element of it.
It is strange, isn't it? Okay, Apostle Moses Thatcher, RFM.
One of my favorite apostles.
Cheers.
It's right up there with Amos Moses. That's okay.
Yes. Okay.
Jerry Reed song.
Gotcha. Well, this one's yours.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
There is a spirit in man. This is from Journal of Discourses 26. That's the last volume, I think. There is a spirit in man, and the inspiration.
How many Mormons know that? By the way, how many Mormons out there know that? How many of you at Fair Mormon knew that 26 volume was the final one?
I hope I'm right.
Yeah. Well,
I hate for you to, be running me up the flagpole and saluting me, and there's 27.
Yeah, that'd be funny, wouldn't it?
There is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty giveth it understanding. The sinful who listen and obey are led to repentance, and through the doors of baptism of the water and spirit are brought out of wickedness.
By the way.
What? Oh, it looks like there's 26 volumes.
You nailed it.
Lucky guess. I'm not sure that General Conference talks have materially improved since Journal of Discourses, volume 26. This is putting me to sleep just reading it. Through the doors of baptism of the water and spirit are brought out of wickedness to the enlightenment of pure knowledge, until in obedience to heavenly law, they secure the keys of power, authorizing them to pass by the angels, inherit glory, become heirs of God, join heirs with Christ. That's the reference to Romans 8 that Mormons love to do. And having abiding in them eternal lives shall beget throughout the endless ages of eternity the souls of the children of men to the honor and glory of God. Does this guy believe in periods? And finally, and create and have dominion over worlds. We finally got there at the end of that incredibly long sentence. Yes, to create and have dominion over worlds. Thank you, Moses Thatcher.
According to Brian Hales, that length of the sentence makes this a much more true statement.
You're right.
Oh, that was.
I wonder if he said that whole thing without inhaling.
Yeah. Now we start jumping into sort of I wouldn't say the modern moment, but kind of one generation back of people, at
least our lifetime.
Yeah.
My lifetime.
Yeah. Your lifetime.
Thanks a lot.
President Nelson remembers this guy when he was a kid.
This is right after he competed in the Olympics, this picture.
Before people landed on the moon, probably, though.
They never did, according to him.
All right. 10th President Joseph Fielding Smith.
Yes.
Remember, this is the guy who excised the 1832 account of the first vision when in 1921 he was called as church historian and then went through the vault, found the things he didn't want any of us to know about, excised them, and put more than one thing in the vault. Yeah, I mean, at least the Seer Stone, more than one of them, at least the 1832 account. The 1835 was sitting somewhere in the records as well. And I remember you did an episode. I remember what else there was, but there was the 8 pages or the 16 pages, 8 leaves that were cut out that are still missing. We don't know where those went off to. And I remember you did an episode where there were some other things that were in Joseph Fielding Smith's vault as well. But
look at that face. You know you can trust that guy. He looks like he might have a bit part in a Hammer horror film from the 1960s.
Those glasses, man, those are so thick. They got that yellow tinge to them, you know.
This is the grandson of Hiram Smith.
Yeah. So if you probably can hear that, but in the background, Alexa's telling me the NFL news for the day. So,
are the Browns winning?
No. They've only won 2 games this entire year. So no. 10th President Joseph Fielding Smith said that great blessing of celestial glory could never have come to us without a period of time in mortality. And so we came here in this mortal world. We are in school, the mortal school, to gain the experience, the training, the joys, and the sufferings that we partake of, that we might be educated in all these things and be prepared, if we are faithful and true to the commandments of the Lord, to become sons and daughters of God, joint heirs with Jesus Christ.
Romans 8.
And in his presence to go on to a fullness and continuation of the seeds forever. And perhaps through our faithfulness, by the way, he says perhaps, perhaps through our faithfulness. But by the way, I think he means it in the way that some of us will make it and some of us won't. So perhaps you will make it.
Right.
Perhaps through our faithfulness to have the opportunity of building worlds and peopling them. Joseph Fielding Smith, Adam's role in bringing us mortality, General Conference. Remember, these don't age well. October 1976, like not as well as comic books and classic cars.
You know, he'd been dead for several years by 76.
Yeah, it was reprinted in the Leah home. So this, but it must have been like I don't know. Let's take a look.
I think it was a Ouija board interview.
Adam's role in bringing us mortality.
So he became president in 1970, like January, right when President McKay passed away. And I think he was president through into 1972 when Joseph Fielding Smith passed away, and Harold B. Lee became president for a year to 1973 when Spencer Kimball became president.
Yeah. So what Scripture Central is saying, so where I got this from must have had
maybe it's 60, maybe just transpose the 7 and the 6. It says 67.
Yeah. December of 1967 is when they're showing it.
Okay.
And then we've got the second quote here. The Father has promised us through our faithfulness that we shall be blessed with the fullness of his kingdom. In other words, we will, by the way, this is we don't know thoroughly. He could have stopped at the first sentence and we would have been like, we don't really know. But this is the guy who knows thoroughly what comes after. In other words, we will have the privilege of becoming like him. To become like him, we must have all the powers of godhood. Thus, a man and his wife, when glorified, will have spirit children who will eventually go on to an earth like this one we are on and pass through the same kind of experiences, being subject to mortal conditions. And if faithful, then they will also receive the fullness of exaltation and partake of the same blessings. There is no end to this development. It will go on forever. We will become gods and have jurisdiction over worlds. If you have jurisdiction over a world, that's your world. You're the one who has jurisdiction over it.
Mm-hmm.
And these worlds will be peopled by our own offspring. Joseph Fielding Smith, Doctrines of Salvation, Book 2, page 48, quoted in Achieving a Celestial Marriage Student Manual. So again, quote in the personal writings, but then it makes its way into the correlated official material of the church, which then makes it an official doctrine of the church. Okay. Talk about this one, RFM.
Yes, I wanted to mention this. This is called Principles of the Gospel, but it's a bit different in terms of there's an investigator's manual called Principles of the Gospel. This is something that was made especially for servicemen and servicewomen. Small book. You can see the thumb in that middle picture. This is a small book. It's made to go into like your pocket in a uniform, carry it with you. So when it says 76 there, it was, of course, republished with some regularity. It started in the 50s. The earliest one I found was 58, which is why the first presidency that signs it in the upper right is David O. McKay, J. Reuben Clark, and Henry Moyle. Having set that standard, anyway, it says in this book, which was read by hundreds, if not thousands, of Latter-day Saint servicemen and servicewomen, quote, an essential requirement for exaltation is celestial marriage, for exaltation depends upon the continuation of the family in eternity and the power to populate other worlds as our Father did this one.
Yeah. So there's that. Then we get, you have anything else you want to say there?
It's so small, but I think it is small, and it's a small point and it's small print. I think that's 1961 there. That's
1961 is the book. There are very few images of this book. By the way, we had a set of this. It came with other things too. There were like 3 books. And it came, you're right, it was the military set, but we had one at Family Pond for, I don't know, a couple years before it sold. Like you said, there's various editions. The quote that I got this from is they must have got it out of the 1976 edition.
Mm-hmm.
The image that I found on Google Images was from a 1961 edition. And as you point out, the earliest one you could find was 1958.
So that's not your thumb.
That's not my thumb.
Okay.
Bruce R. McConkie, the Millennial Messiah. Exalted parents are to their children as our eternal parents are to us. Eternal increase, a continuation of the seeds forever and ever. Eternal lives, these comprise the eternal family of those who gain eternal life. For them, new earths are created, and thus the on-rolling purposes of the gods of heaven go forward from eternity to eternity. So he's not saying it as specifically, but he's pointing to the same concept we've read in the 6-7 slides before this.
I think the language he uses is even more spot on, because what the church is trying to say is this idea that Mormons get their own planets, right? False, false, false. But that's what he's saying here. He says, for them, new earths are created. That means you get your own planet.
Right. For the people who are exalted, new earths are created for them to people.
Yeah, and I feel that this statement comes the closest, if not exactly spot on, with saying what it is the church is now denying.
Yeah. Patriarch Eldred G Smith. This was the last general patriarch of the church. By the way, if I go back to the signatures on the principles of the gospel, again, not to be confused with gospel principles, a manual is still current in the church. And I think, by the way, the military set can still be ordered, if I'm not mistaken. But Henry D. Moyle, we ought to do an episode on him someday, because he pretty much just about bankrupted the church. He was the one who decided a lot of spending was needed, a lot of wasting of money was needed, and almost certainly the outgrowth of Henry D. Moyle almost bankrupting the church is the leadership of the church never going to let that ever happen again by then hoarding as much capital as they could.
Yeah, he decided that if we build chapels all over the world, then they will come.
Yeah.
And they didn't come, and he almost bankrupted the church, so they brought in Eldon Tanner from Canada to set things right, which he did. He saved the church financially.
Yeah. So if you want to take the part here with Eldred G Smith.
Sure.
Or never mind, it's my turn. You did the gospel principle thing.
Okay.
Right? No, never mind. I did Bruce R. McConkie. Your turn. Sorry about that.
It's okay. And so, he says, and so through the power of the priesthood, and he should know he's the patriarch, the man has the opportunity of obtaining that degree of perfection by which he may do what? Create worlds and populate them with his own offspring. This is not something that's hidden somewhere. In fact, I think this comes pretty darn close to being doctrine, even under the current definition. It's something that everybody seems to be saying. Anybody who's talking about this, as far as the leaders of the church, say the same thing, because it's the doctrine of the church. We all know this.
And somebody voted this the BYU speech of the year. So there's a collection of a speech from each year called BYU Speeches of the Year, and this one is noted as one of the best speeches of that year. So interesting.
Doesn't
enough.
really have anything to do with vote. I just always thought they were just trying to oversell it.
Yeah, I think that's true.
There's just some speeches given in 64, so they call them speeches of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Now you get L. Tom Perry. Now, L. Tom Perry wasn't that long ago, and Spencer W. Kimball just a little bit before him in an October 1997 conference. This is, by the way, this happens in the same conference where President Hinckley says, I know the doctrine well, where 2 months earlier he said, we don't teach it, we don't emphasize it, people, we don't know thoroughly about these things. And then L. Tom Perry, in the same conference that Hinckley says, nod, nod, wink, wink, trust me, I know the doctrine. L. Tom Perry is going to go ahead and reiterate the opposite of what Time magazine said President Hinckley communicated. In October 1997 conference titled Receive Truth, Apostle L. Tom Perry cited 12th President Spencer W. Kimball, who taught, quote, Peter and John had a little secular learning, being termed ignorant, but they knew the vital things of life, that God lives, and that the crucified, resurrected Lord is the Son of God. They knew the path to eternal life. This they learned in a few decades of their mortal life. Their righteous lives opened the door to godhood for them and creation of worlds with eternal increase. So there's L. Tom Perry.
Wow, he couldn't have undermined President Hinckley anymore if he'd tried.
Yeah. So there's that. Now we get another one from Spencer W. Kimball. I'll let you take this long one.
Thank you. 12th President Spencer W. Kimball. Desirable as is secular knowledge. One is not truly educated unless he has the spiritual with the secular. The secular knowledge is to be desired. The spiritual knowledge is an absolute necessity. We shall need all of the accumulated secular knowledge in order to create worlds and to furnish them. So we need all secular knowledge in order to create worlds and to furnish them. But only through the mysteries of God and these hidden treasures of knowledge may we arrive at the place and condition where we may use that knowledge in creation and exaltation. That's General Conference 68. What is this? This is something University of Utah speech in 76. He said, each one of you has it within the realm of his possibility to develop a kingdom over which you will preside as its king and God. You will need to develop yourself and grow in ability and power and worthiness to govern such a world with all of its people. That's the matter of marriage. That's the name of the talk. What is particularly significant about this Spencer Kimball quote, is that it is included in 3 different current LDS manuals. Chapter 4 of Teaching Children from 4 to 11 years. A Parent's Guide, because I guess they need to know that stuff about creating worlds. This manual is for parents teaching their young children. They even put the quote under the section, Teach Children to Accept and Understand Their Gender Roles. The second place where it's currently included, this quote by Spencer Kimball, is Doctrine and Covenants and Church History Seminary Teacher Resource Manual Introduction. So it's being taught in seminary. The manual is for teachers of high schoolers. And the third place is Doctrines of the Gospel Student Manual, Chapter 10. This manual is for college students. So they're teaching it to everybody, except for Time Magazine and the outside world.
The title of that third one is Doctrines of the Gospel. The church created a manual to clearly, simply explain the doctrines of the gospel. And one of the doctrines that are shared in Doctrines of the Gospel is that worlds will be created by those who are exalted, and they will be peopled by their spirit children.
Yes.
Okay. So you see this one proliferate throughout the church and its correlated curriculum. So interesting. By the way, I'll just put it up on the screen. Worlds equal planets. Like, it looks like we're looking for a loophole, but one, it would be a stretch to make it mean something else. Second is that these quotes keep saying that it'll happen the same way that this world happened. So if this world happens a certain way, then those worlds would almost certainly have to be planets just like this world is.
Well, it has to be in order to sustain human life.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a meteor.
No.
It's not going to be a comet.
No.
It's not going to be a sun.
Yeah.
It's got to be a planet.
Although Joseph Smith did say people lived on the sun, and Brigham Young did say they lived on the moon, right?
That's because that was a world that had gone on to its celestial glory.
Yeah.
So the exalted inhabitants of the sun were exalted beings. By the way, you know what the first person who landed on the sun said?
Ouch.
That's right. Ooh, 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 ooh. And then you jump around a little bit. Kind of a visual gag.
Yeah. So, okay, here.
That's what celestial beings say all day long. Ooh, ow, ooh, ooh.
All right. So we still have good old President Kimball here for, I think, the third one.
He said a lot about this.
He did. He says, we educate ourselves in the secular field and in the spiritual field so that we may one day create worlds, people, and govern them.
And that's the same line, I think.
Yeah.
In a different publication.
Create worlds, create people, and govern them. Govern the worlds, which means it's your planet. Govern the people.
Mm-hmm.
2001, Henry B. Eyring repeated the key part of this quote in a church educational system, CES Fireside talk on Sunday, May 6th in Moscow, Idaho.
Moscow.
Okay.
They get touchy about that over there. I don't know why.
It's like hurricane.
Elder Bell in my mission got very touchy about it. That's how I learned.
His message was titled "Drive for Learning Must Have Powerful Spiritual Component." Seems like it's missing an A. The quote was repeated not only in the LDS Church News, but also in the October 2002 Ensign. On the official LDS Seminary website, Kimball's quote was again cited by Mormon apostle Richard G. Scott. In Mormonism, seminary is geared for high school students. We already mentioned that. This was what the person who was putting these quotes down, what they made a note of. So then another one, the quote, "The real life we're preparing for is eternal life. Secular knowledge has for us eternal significance. Our conviction is that God, our Heavenly Father, wants us to live the life that He does. We learn both the spiritual and the secular things so that we may one day create worlds and people and govern them." So there it is again.
Because when we create worlds, we have to know all about physics and all about chemistry and all this stuff, right?
Yep.
Then how are we going to use that? I don't know, to create a world.
Yeah, you're going to be good at science. So for those of you out there who didn't do so great at science,
yeah,
ouch.
TK smoothie for you.
And then this one is interesting. I think this is the one we have some video footage of.
It is.
Quote, "Brethren, 225,000 of you are here tonight. I suppose 225,000 of you may become gods. I don't know that we teach it. I don't know that we emphasize it. There seems to be plenty of space out there in the universe, and the Lord has proved that He knows how to do it. I think He could make, or probably have us help make, worlds for all of us. Worlds for all of us. If a world is made for you, whose world is it?
Mine.
Yeah. For every one of us, 225,000. This was Spencer W. Kimball, The Privilege of Holding the Priesthood, November 1975.
Which is 22 years before President Hinckley is giving his comment to Time magazine. President Hinckley was sitting on the stand listening when President Kimball said this.
Yeah. Don't you kid yourself, RFM. He knows the doctrine. Don't you believe any of these misquoted references in Time magazine.
Well, he does know the doctrine.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so damning that he said what he did to Time magazine.
Yeah. And then it makes its way, the same quote makes its way into Doctrine and Covenants Institute Student Manual. And here is Spencer W. Kimball saying that.
Take me home, country roads.
Brethren, it's a great thrill to think that we are part of a congregation of 225,000 men and boys. Some of them are a little darker. Some of them have slant eyes, but they're all men and brethren, and we love them. And we're grateful that they're associated with us tonight in this great meeting. You have been hearing some very solid, firm doctrines here tonight.
Solid, firm doctrine.
I want to relieve you with telling you a story. I suppose all of you young men learned the Articles of Faith before you became a member of the priesthood. I'm wondering if you have retained in your mind those articles.
What are you thinking, RFM?
I'm thinking that we got to go forward to where he gets to this quote. I'm really glad you played the first part. I had played it myself and wanted to remind you to definitely not miss the first part because of what he said.
Yeah.
But you've got to go further into it, I'm sure.
Okay, let's try to
Do
go.
you have any idea where?
We traveled on trains.
I apologize. I should look this up. I feel like I failed.
Where did you come from?
Let's see here. I'm gonna have to sort of bump around here.
Be honest. When you do that, the heavens may be to make the captain, and then the sometimes we have the priesthood meeting, of course. It was 10 generations. Well, I guess we'd say we could have no families, and they're making Abraham's lot.
Well, I'm gonna look it up really quick. I did want to say this.
This is back in the days when the prophet spoke, he would speak for like, what was it? Is this 25 minutes or half an hour? However long he freaking wanted to speak. He would be up there and he would just go, go, go and say all sorts of interesting things. Things which probably raised few eyebrows in the audience at the time, such as some of a darker skin than others, some with slanted eyes. But don't worry about it because we love you just as much as we love the white Mormons. I remember being in Japan in 1980 when President Kimball came over and there was an area conference. And I was there with some other missionaries. All the missionaries attended. As many members as could possibly be there attended as well. And I remember President Kimball was up there talking. It was like this huge concrete place, but there was a lot of people who could be in there. And I was sitting next to Elder Duke, who I don't expect you to know. But he was a tall, gangly kid, and we were good friends. He was a good guy. But we were just sitting there and listening to Elder Kimball talk. And Elder Kimball, of course, this is 1980, right? This is really very shortly after. The priesthood ban had been lifted just 2 years after, and President Kimball was the guy who made that happen. And he was talking, and he talked about, what was he talking about? I don't know. He was just, sometimes he just talks. And he talked about the love that he has for black boys. He said black boys. And he followed it up by saying, and for white boys. And I remember Elder Duke looking at me and going, I'm glad he said white boys too. Anyway, I thought that was a funny time. I don't remember anything else that President Kimball said, but I do remember that. And after it was over, we started filing out. Everybody starts filing out of the this huge arena. And I start noticing as we're walking across the street, and there's, of course, a lot of us. There are probably several thousand of us. And have you found the place? Is that yes?
I think so.
Okay, let's give this a go. We'll go with my story at another time.
I suppose 225,000 of you may become gods. There seems to be plenty of space out there in the universe. And the Lord has proved that he knows how to do it. I think he could make, or have us help make, probably, worlds for all of us. For every one of us, 225,000. Just think of the possibilities, the potential. Every little boy that has just been born becomes an heir to this glorious, glorious program. When he's grown, he meets a lovely woman. They are married in the holy temple. They live all the commandments of the Lord. They keep themselves clean. And then they become sons of God. And they go forward with their great program. And they go beyond the angels and the gods that are waiting there. They go to their exaltation. You remember in the 132nd section, it says that Abraham received all that he received in the same manner, and that Abraham already was on his throne. He had his exaltation. It's been a long time since he died, of course. And then Paul speaks.
I think you can stop there, but you know something? I look at this and I get nostalgic. As crazy as this is back when the church was true. That's what I say. That was when the church was true. That's when the church stood for something. As crazy as and as outlandish as it might be, it stood for something. By the way, on that same clip, you probably want to say something about it, but I would like you to go back to the very beginning, just so I can make a comment about Elder Packer.
Yeah, I think let's see if I can find it. Maybe I got rid of it.
Because Elder Packer, you can see him in the bottom right-hand corner of the frame. Elder Monson is over in the left-hand bottom corner of the frame. Because they're junior apostles at the time, right? And Elder Packer's probably, I don't know. Yeah, he's probably like the newest kid on the block. And he's sitting there looking like I looked like every time I had to attend General Conference. And how I look still when I'm looking at General Conference to do reviews of it.
It's a great.
It's the very beginning. See, bottom left, there's Thomas Monson. Look at the bottom right. You recognize that fellow?
Congregation of 225,000.
That's Boyd T. Packer.
And boys.
Yeah.
He looks like he'd rather be anywhere else.
Yeah, he's plotting out how he's going to write that little factory talk, and he's hard at work thinking about that.
Above him is Marky Peterson, and to Marky Peterson's right is Ezra Taft Benson.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was funny to see Boyd K. Packer sitting there like that.
Yeah, interesting. You're right, a little nostalgia. Okay, let me get rid of that. Let me go back to the slideshow. So then, it's easy to go, well, that's President Kimball and that's Brigham Young. But the trouble is that some of this stuff is still around today. This is you already pointed out the manual that you had looked up earlier that it was part of. I don't remember what manual it was you had looked up, but it was one of them. And it was currently still available on the church's website and still had the quote in it. Mm-hmm. This is Gospel Fundamentals. It looks a little bit like the Gospel Principles book, a little bit different color. This was designed as a basic manual to send out into the places in the church where it was not quite developed yet. So where branches and districts were, this was the book that was sort of given for those local districts and branches to form their lessons around and to get to know the gospel, sort of the gospel principles, but designed a little differently. And this manual is still available. Eternal Life, chapter 36. I'm just going to read the last paragraph. To live in the highest part of the celestial kingdom is called exaltation or eternal life. To be able to live in this part of the celestial kingdom, people must have been married in the temple and must have kept the sacred promises they made in the temple. They will receive everything our Father in heaven has and will become like him. Then the money quote, they will even be able to have spirit children and make new worlds for them to live on and do all the things our Father in heaven has done. People who are not married in the temple may live in other parts of the celestial kingdom, but they will not be exalted.
Are you telling, by the way, I think the next slide has that same quote, but bigger.
Yeah, I should have done that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. You were the one who had to strain your eyes to read the small print. That's the same quote, right?
Yep, same one.
They will even be able to have spirit children and make new worlds for them to live on. Are you telling me, Mr. Real, are you telling me that the church in its FAQ page on its website is denying that Mormons teach that they will get their own worlds when they're exalted, when at the very same time they're teaching that doctrine and that principle to the newest members of the church?
Yes, but one is to the members of the church and the other is to the general public. So,
I think that's the only difference that I can come up with is
Yeah.
the audience, not the truth.
These guys are not the truth tellers.
They're not to be trusted.
No, not at all.
And this was a couple that I threw in there, which was from the scriptures, because doctrine, and this has to do with being gods, right? Doctrine and Covenants, section 76. This is as early as 1832 when this was received. And verse 58, I'm just going to go to the money quote. Wherefore, as it is written, this is talking about those who inherit the celestial kingdom. Wherefore, as it is written, they are gods, even the sons of God. So when Spencer Kimball talks about if you keep yourself pure and follow all the commandments and get married in the temple, right? Then you will become the sons of God. This is different than the general teaching that we all are sons and daughters of God, right? This is a special status that is attained only by the faithful, and it is a euphemism for gods in Mormon parlance, just as it's used here in section 76, verse 58. It means the same thing. Wherefore, as it is written, they are gods, even the sons of God. The next one's from section 132, where it really makes it even clearer. In verse 20, speaking again of those who are exalted, then shall they be gods, because they have no end. Therefore shall they be from everlasting to everlasting, because they continue. Then shall they be above all, because all things are subject unto them. Then shall they be gods a second time, because they have all power, and the angels are subject unto them. This isn't something that is in a corner. Okay, nobody puts this doctrine in a corner. It's all over Mormonism. It's in the scriptures of Mormonism that the faithful become gods.
By the way, angels are subject unto them. Is interesting because as far as Mormon theology goes, it's all people who either are exalted or not, and they're either exalted in the celestial kingdom, or they live in the celestial kingdom, but they're not exalted. We just saw that in the previous quote. Or they get the TK smoothie and they go to one of the other two kingdoms, or they go to outer darkness. But angels aren't a different in rest of Christianity, at least in much of Christianity, the angels are a different class of species than us humans.
Yes.
But in Mormonism, it's all the same. These are all people who lived on earth and enjoyed mortality and proved themselves to one degree or another. We're told that the other two kingdoms of the celestial kingdom are those who aren't exalted per se, because they might have lived the celestial law, except for they didn't get married, or they didn't do something. They didn't fulfill all the requirements. It seems as though, it's off topic, but it's interesting to me that different people who don't quite achieve exaltation and become the gods will be a lesser class of people in the celestial kingdom, and they will be the angels that are subject to the gods. Which
in Doctrine and Covenants, section 132 elsewhere talks about them. So in context, it's referring to them as ministering angels.
Yeah.
Who will remain. Let me see here. It's verse 17. For these angels did not abide my law, therefore they cannot be enlarged, if you know what I mean, but remain separately and singly without exaltation in their saved condition to all eternity, and from henceforth are not gods, but are angels of God forever and ever. So it's in that context that verse 20 is talking about those who are become gods. They will have all power, and the angels are subject unto them.
Yeah, I said that because it reminds me of Jane Manning James, who was sealed to Joseph Smith as a servant. And we go, that's crazy, that's racist. And it is, by the way, it's crazy and it's racist. But you can see the scriptural precedent for those who don't achieve the fullness of exaltation, like Jane Manning James, because she's black, because she can't have the temple ordinances, that the only role she can be is an angel who is subject to the gods, who is Joseph Smith. Anyway, I thought that was sort of interesting.
It is interesting. That's what I guess a ministering angel does. They minister to your needs, your wants, your desires.
They're subject to you.
Yeah.
Which is a sort of being enslaved, which then justifies sealing people to church leaders as servants in the celestial kingdom. Mark E. Peterson said they can, people of color can go to the celestial kingdom, but they will go as servants.
Yes.
Yeah. They weren't making it up. So there's that. We do have the call stuff down there at the bottom if you do want to call in.
Can I read that conclusion?
Oh, yeah. By the way, please. I thought maybe you had that at the end. So go ahead.
I do. I have it ready to go, but go ahead and the number, you have it memorized. I know it's 662-667-6667. Is that right? Do I have it memorized now?
Yep. And then also I will put the link to join us in the studio. I'll put that in the comments. So that should be showing up right now. You can also come into the studio if you want to be anonymous, leave your camera turned off. If you want us to see you, by all means, leave your camera on. And hopefully we already got one call in the queue. We'll have a few more calls or people show up in studio to talk to us. And RFM, please tell us about some work you may know about from some prior moment.
I had written a piece about this very thing 10 years ago, as it turns out, in 2014, when it was fresh off the press, that FAQ thing on the church website, which is still there. And once again, they've been hiding that for a long time. All right, this is just the conclusion. And it says this, first off, why lie? It therefore seems beyond question that the church is intentionally lying about this issue, the one about planets. I do not believe for 1 second that the anonymous scholars responsible for the offending paragraph in the Becoming Like God essay are unaware of the true state of things. Of course they know what the true state of things is. Nor are those who also under official church sanction and approval published the dissembling answer to the frequently asked question of whether Latter-day Saints believe they will get their own planet. They all know it. But this begs the question of why lie about this in the first place. The most obvious explanation is that the church is embarrassed by its belief that the resurrected righteous will create and rule over planets in the eternities, and therefore wishes to publicly deny it. That the church is desirous of appearing more in the mainstream of contemporary Christianity. And then the next section is the law of unintended consequences. Once again, this is just at the end of this paper. If the goal is to get the Gentile world to think Mormons don't really believe this, the gambit seems to have paid off. As various news agencies widely reported, the February 27th, 2014 Associated Press story on this official church pronouncement. So now, and then I quote some of those headlines that you had mentioned at the beginning, Bill. So now the world thinks that Mormons getting their own planet is merely a notion and a misconception. Is this something to be cheered? Milk before meat is one thing, but actively denying belief in the meat is another thing entirely. Are we selling our birthright for a mess of pottage? Are we selling our birthright for a mess of pottage? Has the church learned nothing from the Paul H. Dunn debacle? Do Mormons not teach that one of the primary causes of the great apostasy was the church's willing compromise of revealed doctrine to conform to the philosophies of men? And then I looked at the impact on non-Mormons versus the impact on Mormons of this particular strategy. First, impact on non-Mormons. What happens when non-Mormons who read the AP story discover the truth that Mormons actually do believe this? Will they not then conclude that the church lies about its beliefs? Will this lead them to think more highly of the LDS Church? Will this lead them to have confidence in other church assertions? Or will suspicion and distrust be bred? Impact on Mormons. What happens when Mormons read these new pronouncements? If they are not well versed in the historical record, will they not likely take them at face value and conclude that Latter-day Saints really do not believe they will have their own planet? Do we not face the possibility of balkanizing belief among Latter-day Saints by creating a faction that believes the new pronouncements are correct, while leaving many others who believe the contradictory prophetic pronouncements of over a century? And when these factions collide theologically, as collide they must, what will be the result? Unity or disunity? And when the true facts are revealed through such collisions, will the result be greater faith in the church or less? The final section is titled The Perils of Situational Ethics. This disparity between what the church tells the outer world of non-members versus what it tells the inner world of the faithful may have more alarming consequences. Not only does the church create an outer-inner theology, it also creates an outer-inner morality. By telling the outside world Mormons do not believe they will have their own planets, they are leading people to believe something that is not true. But the church teaches when we lead people to believe something that is not true, we are not being honest. Gospel Principles Manual quote. The church is thereby teaching its members that being dishonest is justifiable under some circumstances, that lying for the Lord is moral. And the church is teaching this by its own example. But if lying may be rationalized in this manner, what other immoral acts may also be justified, so long as it is in service to the church and in obedience to priesthood leaders? Final paragraph. A group of 120 immigrants learned the answer to this question on September 11th, 1857, at a place called Mountain Meadows. If nothing else, the massacre that occurred there should be a constant reminder to Mormons of the very real perils of promoting such situational ethics. Period. End of the article.
Yeah. It seems clear that when you tell the public, no, we don't get our own planet, and every Mormon knows it just rings true from the moment they were in primary to this moment. By the way, I didn't include the President Nelson one. It was either a Christmas devotional, I think. I'm going to try to find that here in a minute while maybe when the caller's on, because I think it's a big deal to show that the modern prophet still teaches the same damn teaching. But when you say Mormons don't get a planet, LDS Newsroom talking to the outside world, to the Gentiles, Mormons don't get a planet, that's silly, it's a caricature, blah, 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 all the stuff that's been said. And then the members have we all know that's the true doctrine of the church. That's the whole point why we give everything to the building up of the kingdom of God, is to get our own planet someday, to hopefully be worthy of exaltation. What you just said in your conclusion is when the member sees that dichotomy of like, oh, it's okay to lie so long as that purpose is whatever you deem the purpose to be, some righteous purpose, you are giving members permission to lie. You're telling everyone across the church, whenever you need to pretend that it's not what you actually believe it to be, whenever you need to get out of something, whenever you need to say the opposite of what's true, go ahead and do it, because we're setting the example. It's okay to do that.
So that you know, I found this while you were talking. It was the 2018 Christmas devotional. President Nelson speaking. That would have been his first Christmas devotional, I believe, as president of the church. Do you want me to read the quote?
I want to put it up on the screen. So let me try to do that. Russell M. Nelson, 4 gifts that Jesus offers you. Let me make it.
One of them is world. That Jesus is so nice.
Yeah, so let me put this up on the screen. And let's go down here to worlds.
Is worlds on there literally?
Well, I don't know that.
Oh, I was sort of kidding around. I don't know.
What is a keyword in the phrase so I can find it?
Preside over worlds and kingdoms. So you can just look up worlds. I'm sure that's probably the only time it's mentioned in it.
Okay. Will you read that? I've got it up on the screen now and people can.
So from 2018, this is the current president of the church teaching us what we all know the church has taught from the beginning, in spite of the church's attempt to convince the outside world of something different. A fourth gift from our Savior is actually a promise of life everlasting. This does not mean simply living for a really, really, really long time, although in his case, it might. Everyone will live forever after death, regardless of the kingdom or glory for which they may qualify. Everyone will be resurrected and experience immortality, but eternal life is so much more than a designation of time. Eternal life is the kind and quality of life that Heavenly Father and his beloved Son live. When the Father offers us everlasting life, he is saying, in essence, if you choose to follow my Son, if your desire is really to become more like him, then in time you may live as we live and preside over worlds and kingdoms as we do. So this is what the current president and prophet of the LDS Church, Russell M. Nelson, is quoting God as saying. God, is saying in essence, quote, if you choose to follow my Son, then in time you may live as we live and preside over worlds and kingdoms as we do.
Yeah, and I'm gonna take this here. All right, and now I'm gonna go back. Let's see here. And go back up here to the top where that whole thing is. And I'm gonna make this a little smaller. So this came out. I don't know do we know what year this showed up? It's been out for a while. It's not something that just came out recent. Well,
Yeah, those question and answers, you mean?
Yep, the fact.
2014. It was in February.
So in 2014, the church says, do Latter-day Saints believe they will get their own planet? No. But then in 2018, the current president of the church, who was then an apostle, said, in time, you may live as we live and preside over worlds and kingdoms as we do. If planet Earth belongs to God or Christ because they preside over it, then that planet that they're talking about will belong to those of us who are exalted because we preside over those worlds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So here you have the church stating something as official doctrine of the church, official answer to a question about doctrine. And then 4 years later, the current president of the church contradicting. And again, if you ask the average Mormon, they would go, this thing at the bottom, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what that is. What I do know is I agree with President Nelson. If we're exalted, we'll preside over worlds and kingdoms as they do.
Yes.
Yeah. The church teaches you to lie, and it does it all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's why I said a while back, and I'm getting t-shirts ready, Mormonism makes liars of us all.
Yeah.
We are taught to be liars in Mormonism.
Yeah.
We are taught that the virtue of protecting and defending and promoting God and his church is the prime directive, and anything else can be sacrificed to promote that goal.
Anytime lying for the Lord is discussed, Fair Mormon goes, that's not true. We don't justify lying for the Lord. Ta-da. All you have to do is grab that fact off of the church's website and go, then explain this to me. And I'd love to hear a Fair Mormon apologist weasel their way out if we were allowed to question them in real time, ask follow-up questions when they say the stupid answer, and then when they back out and try to say something else, hold them accountable. I'd love to know how they weasel out of something like this. This is blatant. This might be one of the most blatant examples in all of Mormon history of the church lying to everyone's face.
All I've got to say is that hearing Fair Mormon lecture about how Mormons don't lie is rich. They don't lie for the Lord. That's like the mission statement for Fair Mormon.
Yeah. You can't get through a page of Fair Mormon without a lie or a deception or an obfuscation.
It's the reason for their existence.
Yeah. To give cover for the lying of the Lord.
Yes. The F stands for false.
Yeah.
Or fraudulent or something like that. Fraudulent information.
Yeah. Fraudulent, apologetic information and research.
Yes.
And they are just researchers.
It's in the name.
So there's that. That's tonight's episode, Getting Your Own Planet in Mormonism. I think at the end of the day, Mormon theology absolutely necessitates that you are getting your own planet if you're exalted, and anybody who tells you otherwise, including the church itself, is just lying to you. Now, a couple of people had some comments that I wanted to just star and just ask here.
Lego my planet. So
Aaron said, so are we just living in someone else's heaven? Yes, like technically that's what it is. This is Jesus's planet, but there's a weird thing that doesn't add up in Mormon theology here, which is Jesus suffered on this world, but he created it before he got a body. But how we'll be exalted is we get our body first, then we do the spiritual creation, and that never made sense to me. Like,
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's because it's Mormonism.
He's the exception to every rule.
And I tried to justify it by going, maybe they gave us a story where he died on this planet, but he died somewhere else. But Mormon theology says, no, he died on this planet, and it covers all the other planets.
Right. And so how do the other planets have any faith in him? And then it starts getting really fuzzy.
Yeah.
And hazy. I entertained the idea that maybe he really he only got crucified once, right? And it only had to be on one planet. The odds are it wouldn't be this one out of thousands and thousands and numberless worlds. So maybe he got really crucified on another planet, and it just looked like he got crucified here. And there was an illusion on all the other different worlds. So people could have faith in that, not realizing at the time that I was entering the heresy of Docetism.
Okay. What's Docetism?
I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's all Greek to me. Docetism was an early, I think it's Greek for seems, madam. Seems. Yeah. The idea that because Jesus became God, that God could not have inhabited an actual physical body because physicality is so at odds with divinity, right? It would corrupt the divinity to have any contact with physicality is the idea. And therefore, God could not become mortal. Otherwise, he would have ceased to be God, to borrow an expression. Therefore, Jesus didn't really get crucified. He just seemed to. It just looked like he did. It was all a big David Copperfield illusion.
And if we're struggling to figure out where the Book of Mormon took place, solely in a northern, central, southern hemisphere, right?
Yes, in the Western Hemisphere, yes.
Yes. The continent, yeah. The hemispheric model, yes. The North and South America, Central America. We can't figure out where Cumorah is. We don't know where the Book of Mormon took place. Everybody's guessing, and they're competing with each other. There's no chance in hell we're going to figure out where Jesus made an atonement if we're going to start arguing that it's somewhere else out there in yonder worlds. That's even a much more, we can't even figure out where the Book of Mormon took place. It just isn't going to be reasonable to figure that out.
It is one of the benefits that the Adam God theory has over what Mormonism is left with, which is that under the Adam God theory, every world has its own savior, and it's the firstborn spirit. But every God over each world is only over that world, at least initially.
Too bad that became a heresy.
It is, because it explains so much.
Yes. That Brigham Young might have been onto something, but then we'd have to admit that we went into apostasy if we admit he was right.
Yeah, it's sticky.
Well, there you go, folks. I don't think we're going to solve all the complexities and contradictions of Mormonism and its theology tonight. But there is the episode, Getting Your Own Planet in Mormonism, where the church, as RFM says, makes liars of us all.
Yeah, and actually, Aaron Roberts, we don't really end up living on someone else's heaven. Where we end up living in exaltation is on this world, which has also gone forward to become class C star. Isn't our sun class C? I can't remember. Anyway, would you look that up for me? So the deal is that, yes, this is our heaven, but it's also the heaven of everybody else who lived on this world and was a faithful Mormon and was exalted. Then we all live here on this planet. This all becomes our heaven. And from here, I guess, we create our own worlds, and it goes from there. At least that's of my understanding.
They're saying a class G star. At least that's what it says here.
I think that class G. Okay, thank you. Class G.
But
wow.
then they say R and N have.
I feel like it got demoted somewhere along the way. It
subsumed
probably happened at the
into
same
the
time Pluto stopped being a planet.
Yeah.
Imagine how bad you'd feel if you were the god of Pluto. And now it's not even a planet. You don't even have your own planet.
No wonder you're dressing like Quakers out there.
Yeah. That's got to be a real blow to the ego.
And then Raphael Shore says, do they just get a planet, or do they get the opportunity to create a world from scratch? And again, he's going back to sort of where we started, which is right. If the church is going to change the question, what the general public is wanting addressed, mm-hmm. and what the church is speaking to. If the church is going to start off by going, I know what they're asking, but in order to obfuscate this issue, I'm going to answer a different question.
Mm-hmm.
That's absurd. Now, some of the quotes we shared tonight suggest maybe one, maybe the other, but at the very least, the question people want to know is, does Mormon theology mean that when you go to heaven, if you're the best kind of Mormon, do you have a planet that you people and you rule over? And the church seemingly doesn't want to answer that question. And if you're going to make a loophole for that, that's ridiculous. So you have to hold their answer accountable to the question that everyone's asking. And in that instance, the church is being very deceptive and dishonest.
This is a reverse straw man, just so you can understand. A straw man is typically when you mischaracterize the other person's argument so you can attack it. What they're doing right now is they're mischaracterizing the question that's being asked of them. It's like they're mischaracterizing their own position in order to deny that it's true, to avoid the fact that something that is almost identical to it, in every material respect, it is identical to it, that gets left to the side and never addressed, to give the impression that you don't believe what you really believe.
Yeah. Every person in the public and any Mormon trying to figure out these contradictory statements is wanting to know, does Mormon theology have it so that if I am the best kind of Mormon and I get exalted, do I get a planet and people that planet with spirit children of my own? And the church is either lying and obfuscating by answering a different question, or they're lying about the question, the answer to the question that's being asked. In either way, they're lying. All right, let's take a few phone calls. So
it's like Carol Marcus says in Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan. Can I cook or can't I?
Okay. Khan. All right. So this might be Nathan. Nathan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. And how are you doing, gentlemen?
Doing great. Welcome to Mormonism Live. You're on with Radio Free Mormon and myself.
Yeah, thanks. I've been really enjoying this chat. I had a couple of experiences that I had with this. So I remember when I was at Brigham Young University in 2007, this was just a topic of discussion we had. I remember over lunch, it was, four of us, and we were talking about the different planets we wanted to make. One person wanted to make a Harry Potter planet where magic was real. So just
was that you? Was that you, Nathan?
It was not me.
What kind of planet did you want to make?
I don't remember. I just remember that one person, speaks to the time. One person wanted to make a Harry Potter planet. One person wanted to make a Twilight planet.
I would want to make a Marvel Comics planet in case anybody cares.
There you go.
No DC characters are allowed on my planet.
DC. Another one was when I was in the MTC. I remember the branch president, the person who's in charge of making sure the missionaries feel really bad about.
Don't blow the place up, right?
Yeah. But I remember right before we left for our missions, he said, he was saying, let's all make a plan that we'll all get together in our celestial kingdom. We're going to meet on your planet. You bring the potatoes. It was just a part of, it was just assumed to be part of the doctrine, not some fringe thing.
Absolutely. I remember when I was on my mission in Japan, we were out on some kind of field trip. All the missionaries were and all the members of a ward. We'd gotten up on this mountain somehow, and I remember we were looking out, and it was a beautiful vista. And there was this husband and wife from the ward, and they were sitting by each other on the mountainside. I'm up above them and to the side, so I can see them sitting together against this incredible backdrop. And that was a thought that came to me, was that this is like what it's going to be like when they're exalted and they can create their own world. It's a romantic notion.
Yeah. And then I guess, just to wrap up with this particular FAQ that that I think kind of started this, that I remember this was shared on social media a little bit ago, and I remember a faithful response underneath it saying, well, they were parsing it out. They were changing the question as we talked about. They said, well, yeah, it's not Mormons get their own planet. Each one gets worlds without end. So they're not technically lying.
Right. They're technically being deceptive and working very hard at it.
By the way, that's a worse answer. They don't want to tell the truth because the truth is worse than what people are guessing at. They don't want to sound crazy. So getting one planet is one thing, but then now you get a planet, and then your spirit children get planets, and then their spirit children get planets, and you're technically over all the planets in that neighborhood. It gets to be absurd, and they want
all the planets in your MLM downline.
Yeah, yeah. If you get 3 and they get 3, then all you need to do is you lock up 3 people who will pass on the message, and they lock up 3 people who will pass up the message, and next thing you know, you're a millionaire.
Yeah, it's triangle shaped, sort of like a pyramid, and you could call it a plan or a scheme.
Yeah, a pyramid.
It's the Ponzi scheme of salvation. That's what they call it. That's what Alma called it. Chapter 36, the Ponzi scheme of salvation. By the way, there was a comment up here earlier before Conan, the librarian, says, I want to live on Tim Rathbone's planet. I don't know if you can find it again. It says, I hope that Bill, Real, and RFM are on the same planet. Well, I got news for you. Your wish has been granted.
Dun, dun, dun.
We are.
Well, thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you both. I really enjoyed the show. You both have a great evening.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, Nathan.
Before I go to the second call, I just want to say, folks, I'm just going to put a plea out. If there are folks out there who enjoy our content, we would very much appreciate you joining the team and becoming a regular supporter of Mormonism Live. You can go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, send us $5 a month, $10 a month. That donation is tax exempt inside the United States. You'll get a email receipt for that. It's how we do what we do. It's what gives us the time to research topics like this one, to be able to put a show together and to spend our life energy, RFM and I, trying to give you enough information that you can make informed decisions about how you navigate this faith. And also, we hope to entertain you a little bit along the way as well. And so, folks, for those who do support the program, thank you. Very much appreciated. Those who are donors to the show. And if you're not, if you've been watching the show, you're new to the show, or you've been watching for a long time and have never taken the opportunity to donate, would very much appreciate it. It would mean a lot to us. And it doesn't need to be much, $5 a month, $10 a month. Please go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, and thank you very much for helping us to be able to do what we do. You said last week that this is the most enjoyable work you do in all across your entire life, and I feel the same way. And
absolutely,
yeah. So, folks,
this is better than that year I spent playing professional baseball for St. Louis.
Listen here, Elder Dunn. With the shrapnel in your hip, I know. But we do, folks. We do need those donations, and we very much appreciate them. And thanks so much for considering that. All right, caller number 2. I don't know the name. You'll have to tell me the name, caller.
It's Jared.
Jared. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any brothers, Jared?
Good Mormon. It's a good Mormon name.
Yeah.
Are you a good Mormon?
Well, let's let my state president decide that one.
Yeah.
But,
you don't have jurisdiction, RFM.
You don't have jurisdiction over yourself in this church. That's the thing. Somebody else has to decide whether you're good.
RFM has never played for the St. Louis Cardinals, like Dunn never did either. But just for tonight, to go along with tonight's thing, I'm not sure what we're talking about. Like one planet, hell, I was promised a whole damn galaxy.
Who promised you that?
My seminary teacher did, if I remember back in the early 90s.
I wonder if that's legally actionable. If you could sue them for strict performance.
Told me I could have a whole damn galaxy. I could make any planet I wanted.
Take him to court.
Like back then, I was really into snow skiing before I hated the snow in northern Utah, and I could build a whole snow kingdom where I could go skiing if I wanted to. And that's what he told me. That's what I thought I was in for.
Yeah,
so I think there's a little bit of a delay here.
No. We heard you. It's just I'm sitting there racking my mind because I think I just had the anticipation of getting a planet. I wasn't really thinking that big. You guys were thinking bigger than I was.
Oh, I thought we were getting a whole galaxy. I could make a galaxy with whatever I wanted to, with whatever planets that suited me. I could have a dirt bike track planet. I could have all sorts of crazy stuff.
I feel like your seminary teacher was teaching you false doctrine.
Well, he probably was, but honestly, the real reason I've actually been jonesing to call you guys tonight, and I've been making a bunch of comments in the chat.
Yeah.
But I just started an argument tonight with my stake president because I'm done with the church at this point. And I just started to take on an argument with him tonight. And I'm just trying to take a different approach than most people, at least I think. I'm starting out with the SEC ruling with him. And, of course, what does he send me back? The bull crap from the church statement where the lawyers told the church leaders what to do. So clearly he's never read the actual SEC filing himself.
Yeah, we consider the matter closed.
Well, yeah, I don't consider it closed, but
doesn't matter what
I'm
you
actually
think.
trying to. Well, I know it doesn't matter. They don't give a damn what I think. I know that. And
wait a second. It's Wednesday night. Okay, Jared, it's Wednesday night, and you're getting into an argument with your stake president. What does this look like? Are you going over to his house and yelling at him through the window? Are you emailing him?
No. It started with texting today, and I can actually send you the text if you want me to, but it just started out with me saying to him that I had some concerns about the church leadership and their dishonesty, and if he would be willing to, I'd like to meet with him and discuss it.
And did he refer you to the bishop?
No, I've already gone through my damn bishop. My bishop, actually, I told my bishop I didn't trust the church leaders, and he said, well, I'd like to know what you think and how you're feeling. And I said, well, give me a call anytime and we can discuss it. And that was like 3 weeks ago. And I've never received another message back from the bishop.
Oh, so now you're taking it up a notch.
Yeah, so, well, you know, it's just me and my nature. I don't even know how to do whatever.
It's okay. I was just wondering how it is that you got into this argument with your stake president, and you're telling us.
Well, just, okay, so long story short, like I've had a lot of disgruntled stuff going on with the church it's been going on for several years. And just researching things and listening to certain podcasts, I won't name who they're, or Sam, and
that one you can name. That's one of the few exceptions.
Yeah, and so I just you know, the whole thing, and then the FCC thing really has been really bothersome to me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so, just like it's come to a head. Like I don't attend church. Like I actually teach a Sunday school class twice a month, but I refuse to like.
But you attend church to go there, right? I mean, you are teaching it at church, right?
Yeah, I go to an LDS ward in northern Utah.
Okay.
I won't say what city, but
okay.
My daughter's in my class, but like, you know, my wife and I have kind of come to terms that we're, you know, we want to move in, but me, myself, and my nature, I just can't let shit go. Does that make sense? And I like to fight.
Well, when you get excommunicated, would you consider coming on the show to tell us your story?
Oh, I'll fucking come on before that. I don't give a damn.
I think you're going to have to be on Mormonism After Dark, my friend.
Yeah. Yes.
And I really don't. I actually discussed this with my brother tonight about he's like, you're going to get excommunicated. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Excommunicate me. Like, that's on their head, not mine. I don't give a damn.
It's all pretend anyway.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. And like, I work a lot in St. George, Bill Real. Maybe we could communicate sometime.
Yeah. If you have Facebook, reach out to me on Facebook Messenger.
I do not have Facebook.
Okay. Well, send me an email then. And the email is in the show notes for this show. Mormon Discussions Podcasts @gmail.com.
Okay, I could do that.
Well, thank
you.
So,
like, just basically, it started out tonight just saying I sent a text to my stake president because I was sick of my bishop ignoring me, which actually my bishop's a good friend of mine. And then I just said I'm struggling with information that has come to my knowledge that has led me to distrust the church leaders. Unfortunately, I can't contact the church leaders, who, in my view, are the ultimately responsible for my distrust. Unfortunately for you, the responsibility of my inquiry is laid upon your shoulders. Would you be interested in discussing this with me? And then I gave him my name and my ward, and then he contacted me back and said, thanks, love to have you sit down with you and discuss it with you. I have an appointment tonight. You can come to me at 9:30 tonight. Like, I am not prepared to do this right now. There's a whole lot of information I want to go through with him. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to make it really easy for you. In the comments of the show right here, I just put it up. That link right there will take you to 4 different sources. One of them is the deception of the lying in Mormonism. So it's like 50, 70, 100 long of evidence-based. Like, you can click the links. It tells you exactly what it was that they lied about and where you can show the discrepancy in the sources. The next one is list of inconsistencies that challenge faith. So it's like the absurdities about Mormonism. So how Mormonism is absurd, the things that don't add up. Then you've got prophets infallibility, things leaders said that they reversed or abandoned. And then the last one is Mormonism Live's deep historical dives into Mormon history. And many of those point out with sources on the screen of the deception. And I would find it difficult that anybody could counter those four in any way that had anybody resolving anything. So,
well, I mean, and I can do that, but my whole argument started with the SEC, and that's kind of the approach I want to take.
Yeah,
with the whole thing, because like, I mean, I can give them whatever, but they can't argue with. I mean, just
watch them
with my back and forth text, which we don't need to go over right now, but like we had several tonight where I basically said, hey, the SEC said this, and he's like, well, here's what the church said, and I said, no, I said that, I said I'm familiar with that, the statement issued by the church, it's totally misleading. The SEC ruling that the church agreed to is explicitly challenged by the SEC ruling. The SEC ruling includes the phrase multiple times with the church's knowledge, which means the church leaders had knowledge of their illegal activity and went forward with it. Yeah. And then, of course, he didn't want to go at that. And then he's like, I'm happy to meet with you. And then I used the golden rule of Mormon missionary stuff. I used the commitment pattern on him. And I said, will you read the SEC ruling and before I meet with you? And he said he would, but I would love to get somebody's input, because I mean, I feel like I'm not educated at all, but I think I can argue fairly well. Not as good as a lawyer. RFA.
You're doing great.
But yeah, I would, obviously what he's saying to me is just standard bullshit that he got, and he's like, oh, Elder Christopherson,
What he's going to end up telling you, just so you know, is that you need, Jared, just so you're prepared, the upshot's going to be your stake president is going to tell you, you need to read the Book of Mormon more, you need to read General Conference talk, you need to go to church, and you need to pay your tithing, and that will resolve all of your questions and concerns about the church.
Yeah, I know that's what's going to come down the pipe, but I'm not that easygoing. Yeah. I'm like, spoiler alert, one of the apostles lives down the street from me. Or used
Which
to.
one?
His initials are GF.
GF. George Franklin?
GS?
No, George Sampson, but not Samson or George. GF.
Gary Stevenson.
Oh, I cannot confirm nor deny that.
He's a billionaire. Are you like super wealthy to live down the street from a billionaire?
No, I'm not wealthy.
So you live way down the street.
This is Gary's third home.
I do know GF.
And across the railroad tracks.
I know his friends. I know his family. I know how intertwined they are with their jobs.
I saw what you did there. No.
Do you know anything about his son?
Which one?
The one.
The one who got in trouble.
The one.
The one that we're not talking about. I'm just asking if you know about it.
The other one.
That's as much as you're getting out of me.
Me too.
Dude, what do you want to know? There's plenty of my name in my ward.
Yeah, start asking questions. Ask about the kids. Get a little bit of more information on each of them, and you'll know which one we're talking about.
Yeah, there's KS. There's a lot of them. They all work for the church, and like amazingly,
that doesn't surprise me.
And also, GS's old partner has lots of his church, of his children that work for the church that have been moved on from that company he used to belong to, that I don't know, they run a long ways on a stationary thing. I don't know what it's called.
It's exercise equipment. I can't remember the exact name. Hey,
I
Jared.
don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Good. We'll leave it at that. By the way, Bill, is there a third caller?
Yeah, there is one more caller. So
Jared, we're going to have to drop you before midnight approaches, okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. So I would you guys mind if I contact you some way?
No, contact Bill. Absolutely. I don't mind at all.
Yeah.
Did you get you got the email address, right? It's there in the show notes, Bill?
Yep. Contact
Look at the
me.
show notes.
on
Yep.
YouTube.
Use the
write it-
email address. Get in contact with Bill, please.
You,
Okay.
Bill.
I'm happy to
My
receive
name is-
messages from anyone.
He does that.
My name is Jared. My last name starts with the C, like, JC, but not the real JC.
Okay. Well, I'll just Jared C. I got it. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for the call.
Okay.
Thanks for
All
calling
right,
in.
thanks, guys.
Well, I think we narrowly avoided a lawsuit there.
Yeah, we're fine. I guessed Gary Stevenson, and he didn't confirm or deny. So whoever the GS was that he was talking about,
Yes.
I was just curious about the kids we weren't talking about.
Yes, it could have been another apostle with the initials GS.
Yeah. Isn't everybody an apostle? All right. So the last call of the night, I think, is Sam. Sam, is that you?
Sam.
Yes, that's me. Ahoy, hoy.
Hey, hoy, hoy. Welcome to Mormonism Live.
Thank you so much. I'm just so happy to be talking with you both right now. Hello from Portland, Oregon.
Nice. Go Trailblazers.
I had two quick thoughts. So, do Mormons still have the missionary plaques up in the church halls for their wards? Is that still a thing?
I haven't really been to church in 10 years, but then it was a thing. That's not really up to date, but maybe people in the live chat can weigh in. Do you know anything about that, Bill?
Okay, what's the question? Because I'm confused.
I think the question was whether they still have the missionary plaques up, like, on the wall behind the glass when the missionaries are out on their mission.
Oh, I don't
And then when
know.
they come back, they're sort of awarded to them, and then they take them and put them on their own wall.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been to church in maybe about a decade almost at this point. Well, not that long, but 7 years.
Yeah, I think that I'm about a decade as well. So I'm just not up to date. But, you were reminding me, Bill, when you were talking about the quote, I'm going to butcher this, but like, as God was, man will become something.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
My high school boyfriend had that scripture on his missionary plaque, and he had that specifically because he was like, this is the whole point of like what we're doing to convert people is to become, gods in eternity and build each other up into this, I don't even know, celestial glory. I don't know how else to call that.
So they can have worlds. Yeah.
And then, yes. And then secondly, similar to the last caller, I was taught in seminary something that's so bizarre. I don't know if this has any real basis. So you're going to have to give me some knowledge.
As opposed to the stuff you were taught in seminary that's not really bizarre. That stuff has a basis. You're probably talking about like in church leaders and scriptures and things, right, though? That kind of basis?
I believe so, but it might have been like Joseph Smith's weird fundamentalist stuff at the beginning where everything was just throw something at the wall and see what sticks. So we're at Provo High School. I'm going to, Provo High School Seminary. I think it is my sophomore year. And the teacher is kind of teaching us, this is in the early 2000s, about this kind of godhood progression. And so he starts talking about how Joseph Smith will one day become the Holy Ghost. And then he'll become a Jesus Christ on another world in another iteration. And then he'll become God. There was just this kind of like reincarnation and progression. And I was just trying to soak it all in. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't know if you guys have any anything that you can point me to where that is actually written down somewhere. Just
Sure.
quotes for that.
Sure. Joseph Smith did not teach that, but it has become a way of trying to answer. Okay. Without going into too much detail, Sam, is it? Without going into too much detail here, the church's plan of salvation and the way things are structured and taught creates certain problems. And most people, a lot of people don't think about it too much, so they're not really aware of the problems it creates. Bill talked about one earlier, which is, how is it that Jesus becomes a God before he ever gets a body? When the entire plan of salvation and exaltation is that we have to get bodies before we become a God. Even God the Father had to get a body before he became a God. How is Jesus a God before he gets a body? Which leads some people to speculate that Jesus did have a body, that he had lived on a prior world and was exalted from that. It was probably the first world that Heavenly Father created, right? He's got a bunch of kids, spirit kids. One of them's Jesus. And he goes on to be exalted. And now Jesus creates his own world, right?
Right.
And now, what does Jesus do? He's got a body, right? But now he's got to become the Adam in that world. Anyway, there's this whole thing. What it ends up being is that it requires what are called multiple mortal probations. Have you ever heard of that expression?
I have.
That's what your seminary teacher was talking to you about. It is very speculative. I would agree that this is not church doctrine, but it is a way that some people, like your seminary teacher, who should not have been teaching you this crap in class and probably should be canned, should have his ass fired if they knew he was teaching that shit to you. I'm sorry, still not Mormonism After Dark. If the church knew he was teaching that crap to you, he would have been disciplined, if not fired.
Interesting.
Because that is so outside the standard correlated stuff that they want the students taught. But sometimes people who are really interested in the gospel and these questions, and I was certainly one of them, and I still am from a different perspective, they are the kind of people who go to becoming a seminary teacher because they're sure not doing it for the money. And then sometimes they cannot resist trying to teach their own pet theories to their students. And I think that sounds like what was happening in your class.
I think you're spot on, and I really do appreciate your expertise kind of clarifying this. My mind is so fuzzy. That was almost 20 years ago. So yeah, thank you. It did very much strike me as like kind of like Buddhist reincarnation, and when you say the multiple mortal probations, I just imagine like the Lori and Chad Dayball kind of shit we're getting into, just madness of like epic proportions, just all fantasy nonsense. So yeah, I appreciate you.
And you notice they have to use probations. They can't use the word reincarnation, because one of the things that Joseph Smith said, he didn't say a lot about reincarnation, but the one thing he said about it was that it was a false doctrine. So then they have to distinguish multiple mortal probations from reincarnation. The way they usually do that is saying, well, reincarnation is coming back on the same planet. This is on different planets. So Joseph Smith would be cool with it.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the call.
Yeah. Peace out from Portland. I hope everybody is, feeling mentally well and safe after the election, and no riots or crazy shit happening downtown. Nothing's on fire. Everything's okay. So I think we're gonna get through the night.
And we'll see you.
Take care.
And we'll see you Friday at Mormonism After Dark.
Oh, I am there almost every single week. You have a very dedicated listener in me.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Thanks for calling in, Sam.
I love you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, have a good night.
Bye-bye. RFM, I found something. Let me get rid of the show here. So you'll hear a beep probably. There it is.
Okay.
Let me put it up on the screen.
You found my baseball card.
I did. I went back in the olden days of the St. Louis Cardinals
That's me right there.
I found Radio Free Mormon when he played baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. I drew an arrow there to it, circled your head.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there it is. What was
You've
it
got
like?
proof.
What was it like to
Proof,
play under Trent
baby.
Boyer? He was when he was a player, he was a all-star, I think third baseman, and anyway, it had been quite an honor to play underneath him, the manager.
Well, yes, it was. It was. We were all quite honored. I
Yeah.
can tell you some stories, believe me. When you
Yeah,
got a
well-
few drinks into this guy, he was a hoot.
Maybe we'll talk about that this Friday at Mormonism After Dark, which will be at 8 p.m. And folks, please tune in then for that. Otherwise, we'll see you Monday for the newscast or next Wednesday for Mormonism Live at 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time. Anything else from you, RFM?
I've had a wonderful time tonight. I'm feeling safe. I'm feeling secure. I'm feeling great. How are you feeling, Bill?
Life is good. I feel like life keeps moving along, and it's not for the weary, but I'm having a good old time.
You know what my philosophy is?
What's that?
The country is more important than any president.
Yeah, and they last 4 years or 8 years or 4 years and then 4 more at some other point, and here we go.
Yeah.
The last team didn't kill it, and the team before that, or the one before that, or the one before that, and it almost never is as bad as the doomsday sayers have it being, no matter which side they claim is the problem.
I've read some history. I'm not a history buff, but it seems like the country's weathered worse storms than anybody thinks this might be.
Yeah, James Buchanan.